The clock is now correct. Productions presents a video whose subject matter you can discern from the video title. But if you cannot, what really matters here is that on January 25th of 2017, I uploaded that video. It's been more than 6 months since I uploaded that video. In fact, it has been more than a year since I uploaded that video, and I said I was going to upload a 1-year review. Oops. So, I guess this is the 1-year review? It's more like a year and a half. Maybe even more than that. It's more than a year and a half. In fact, in June, I believe, at the beginning of June, it will be 2 years. So, a lot has changed, but a lot has certainly remained the same. Okay, because I'm certain that not everybody has the time to watch every last video that I upload, I'm going to go over basically specification-wise what this is, as well as my previous thoughts, and I'm going to add my new thoughts. That belongs to it. But we'll get into that. So basically the machine itself, you can see here's the keyboard, here is the trackpad, we'll get more into that. There is a fingerprint sensor right there. On this side there are two USB 3.0 ports. Underneath there I believe is also a micro, either mini display port or micro HDMI, one of the two. I'm pretty sure it's display port though. A combination headphone microphone jack, VGA port. I think that is it for ports on this side. We got a cooling vent. On the back is power, Ethernet, another USB port, USB 2.0 however, a USB 2.0 port here. I believe there is a micro SD card, a regular SD card slot, and there's an Ultra Bay on this side as well. If I'm missing something, I will be sure to make note of it in the comments section. Other specs that this has a 1366 by 768, I believe that's 16 by 9 aspect ratio display, which would explain this right here. It might be 16 by 10, I'm not really familiar with all the aspect ratios because it's not something I really care about, other than 4:3, which gives you the most pixels per horizontal resolution. But anyway, never mind that. It's a 14-inch display, as 430 would have you believe. The platform is Ivy Bridge, so it's rather outdated by now. I think this one's got a Core i5-3320M, which is a 2.6 gigahertz CPU. I don't believe it's the lowest end of them all. DDR3 memory. If I remember right, this one's got either 8 or 10 gigs, something. You can go ahead and have a look, and it's probably a good idea to actually do so. It's running Windows 7, of course. There's our Windows Experience Index. Up 2.6, 3320, 8 gigabytes of RAM. And I think that's really all that I'm going to describe for now. We'll get into everything else later. So how about the pros and cons that I had mentioned in the original video? Well, having not watched the video, I don't really remember what they all are, so I'm going based on memory. And considering that video was recorded more than a year ago, my memory has certainly faded about it. But here we go. The display, which is one of the main gripes that a lot of people have with these, is such a low resolution display. Personally, I'm indifferent to it, because I am not a resolution freak, I am a usability freak. The viewing angles on this display are actually pretty good. It's not too bad. I don't know what type of display panel it uses, but I don't really think it matters that much. It's only 1366 by 768. Once again, I would much rather have a 4:3 aspect ratio display, or even a 16 by 10. It would certainly give you much more resolution. Or hey, you could even get a larger resolution panel for this. I suppose they make them in larger resolutions. A lot of people contest that. They say, oh, 4K at 14 inches is great. Well, frankly, I don't think so, because even with the scaling, as far as I'm concerned, scaling is just a hack on top of something that doesn't work. So, that's that. If you have to scale, your resolution's too high. And frankly, if you've got a scale, you're just wasting your space anyway. You might as well just go for the lower resolution at lower cost. So that was that. I'm indifferent towards the display panel. The webcam is kind of shite, but that's alright. I don't really care much for webcams anyway, so... And for webcams, it's not really too bad. The microphone is absolutely terrible, but pretty much any ThinkPad that's ever been produced has got a terrible microphone. So it's not something that this thing is really, alone on. I noticed that the Ultra Bay has changed in size. If you notice, if you can't even see it, there's a gap right there, which is kind of annoying, but certainly not show-stopping. I don't think there's really anything else that I need to mention. Oh, there's an express card slot here that I forgot to mention, as well as a Kensington lock. But that is pretty much all that she wrote for that. The onboard speakers are junk, but again, that's not a trait that's specific to this one. ThinkPad speakers, they're okay, and they get reasonably loud. They're kind of tinny, there's not really a lot of bass, but once you add external speakers, even cheap computer speakers from an IBM Aptiva like these, you will not want to go back. We'll just put it that way. But here we go with all of the gripes. Actually, before that, I do want to mention that the presence of the track point is a nice sign. The USB 3.0 is great. I absolutely love it. Unfortunately, that does mean that there's no eSATA and no FireWire, but both of those are things that I have not found myself missing. It's got VGA, which, again, this is a hotly contested subject, but I think that VGA... The demise of VGA is rather sad, and it's rather premature, if you ask me, because this is still the one true display standard that everything has. And the fact that manufacturers do not even feel the need to include adapters to adapt to VGA is kind of ridiculous. I'm getting kind of tired of this, and I'm getting kind of tired of the arrogant attitude of the computer community, the enthusiast community towards VGA, because it's unwarranted and it's wrong. So I guess there's one thing. Although saying that it's wrong is probably also going to get a couple of people hounding on my back, because technically that's also not wrong, because it's their opinion, but such is the way that things go. The fact of the matter is VGA is still widely used. That's a fact. So, except in gaming. Most people use HDMI now for that. Having said that, I've got a ridiculous setup going on here, so maybe, my experiences with this are kind of tainted, but I found the USB has been kind of funky. But it's not necessarily just been this with this machine. It drops drives at random. Drives will not work, or they'll show up, but you can't access anything on them, and that's kind of annoying. It usually means I'm going to have to unplug the whole USB hub and plug it all back in again, and that's really quite irritating. But the really big negative that I mentioned in that video was that of the build quality, and it's got multiple facets. It's obvious that this was built in a time when the computer was getting a lot cheaper, the business-oriented computer. Let's start with the keyboard. Some people say these are great keyboards. I disagree wholeheartedly. This is one of the worst keyboards I have ever used on a laptop. Discounting consumer-grade ones. Business-grade laptop. It's the worst keyboard I've ever seen on a business-grade laptop. The HP EliteBook chiclet-style keyboard is better than this piece of crap. And I don't know why that is, because this is a very expensive laptop. So I would expect a, somewhat halfway decent with regards to build quality keyboard in a multi-$1,000 laptop such as this. It's not there. In fact, I find it hard to believe that this one has seen... If I had continued to use this as the primary keyboard, I think I would have had to buy yet another one. This is the second keyboard I've put in this machine. And what happens is, even through, very light use on some of these very rarely used keys, like the Y. I'm trying to think of all the others. I think the H has had problems. The K, although that's home row, so I guess that kind of makes sense. It doesn't matter. The keys pop off. And the issue is not so much the key, rather it's the scissor switch. Now, I don't have an example of the actual... Well, I do. There's part of one attached to this keycap. This breaks. That little plastic thing that's in there, it breaks. So you can't put the key back on. Now, I don't know about you, but Lenovo had a great keyboard design in the previous generation ThinkPads, and they threw it away for this. Now, I know you can replace it with a regular keyboard. I think you have to do a little minor modification. You can replace it with the T430 keyboard. That's fine. But again, that's a hack on top of a poorly designed solution. So, there's no reason at all why they couldn't have just left the keyboard alone. Overall, the design still shares many cues with previous generation ThinkPads. That's fine. The trackpad's the same. Most everything else is still the same as the T410 and 420. I did notice that the display panel's a little bit thinner, but that's okay. I mean, it makes the whole laptop thinner, which is something we'll get into in just a minute, because that is not something I mentioned in my original video. But it is a little thinner. And, somebody who is not necessarily progressive thinking, I guess, would say that that's a sign of cheapening out, and maybe it is. But thinning a laptop is not necessarily a bad thing until it goes too far. Again, there will be further discussion about this. But in the meantime, I think that's pretty much it. I don't have anything else I need to mention about it, because that's all that I had mentioned in the previous video. With that now out of the way, let's get on with this review. The 2-year, I'm going to call it the 2-year review, even though it's still not quite 2 years. Unfortunately, the only thing I'm going to be adding to my previous review is negative, because I have experienced a lot of negatives with regards to this machine in the last year or so. So we're going to start with the VGA port on this box. This VGA port, even though it's a very nice thing to have, I have found, and I don't know what I should attribute it to, if it's the operating system, or if it's the driver, or if it's the chipset, or if it is the actual port itself, but I find that it not only does it not remember the display settings that I've got set, which, and please do excuse me, there's going to be some flickering here in a second, I've got it set as follows. It is set to, it's not maximum, maybe it is the maximum resolution. But it is set, I think, to 600 by 1200. It's a 4:3 display. And 85 Hertz. I do not set my CRTs to 60 Hertz because, excuse me, I can see 60 Hertz. I am part of the very small fraction of the population that can see 60 Hertz. And it is like looking into a strobe light. Similar to what you just saw there, although not quite to that same effect. It's rather fast, and it's rather annoying when it does so. It's not headache-inducing or anything. It's hard to look at, and it's just really annoying. So, there I suppose is that. So I have that set up that way. But I find that sometimes when I unplug and plug in the monitor, it doesn't remember that. It goes back to 60 Hertz. And frankly, that's also very annoying. I haven't noticed it of late, but I don't reboot my machine often. So I guess there is that as well. Minor gripe, probably not really a problem with the computer, but worth mentioning nonetheless. The keyboard and trackpad are still, as far as I'm concerned, crap. I'm not sure if I mentioned it, if it had happened by the time my previous review was made, but the trackpad has stopped working. It randomly registers, I think it's left clicks, but it's either left or right. It randomly registers left or right clicks, and that's pretty useless. So I had to unplug it in order to use the computer. And I've already mentioned the issues with the keyboard. It's got everything to do with build quality. I replaced the keyboard and the trackpad with an external keyboard and a mouse. And while I'm also not very enamored with this keyboard, the mouse is okay. They certainly dealt with the problem. I prefer to have this much more than I would suffer using this, because at least this is somewhat tactile, as opposed to this. The other huge gripe that I have with this machine that has developed, and it's got worse as time has progressed, is with this combo jack that I have mentioned previously as being a potential problem. Again, I am not positive where the exact issue lies, but I frequently find that the machine thinks that it's being disconnected, and it goes back to the internal speakers, changes my volume settings in the process, and then goes immediately back to these and again changes my volume settings in the process. Why? I'm not unplugging it. It's just sitting there. It's just existing. So there is something definitely wrong with this combo jack, and again it suggests that the build quality is really frankly just not up to snuff. I attempted to fix the problem by disabling the onboard speakers because frankly I'm never going to use them again, but that's only made it such that it unplugs that. It still does the same thing, but it then goes to not having any audio devices, which is more desirable because I would really rather not. If I'm wearing headphones, I would really rather not have the sound spontaneously just start coming out of the onboard speakers at arbitrary volume, but it's still very annoying to have my sound cut off every few seconds. At the beginning, it stables itself out. Like, I mean, it doesn't sit here forever and just constantly go back and forth, but it just does it more often than I really would like, and it does it often enough to be an irritation. So, worth noting is that. But now we get to the major negative, and I think that's the last thing I'm going to really mention with this machine. But before we get to that, I've got two ThinkPads here. That is a Lenovo ThinkPad T430. This is an IBM ThinkPad R40, I think. Yes, this is an IBM ThinkPad R40. And I want to use this as a stepping stone into what is hopefully not going to be a rant, but might turn into a rant, because this annoyed me big time about that machine over there. So here's the R40. The only thing about the design of the R40 that really matters to our discussion is the design of the hard drive bay. It's right here. You can see there are ports underneath it, which is just fine. It's integrated into this, so this whole thing comes off. It's really an ingenious design, but because of how thick the machine is, it really didn't affect anything to put the drive on top of that, because there's enough thickness to do it anyway. Most modern ThinkPads dedicate the entire vertical space to the hard drive. It is right here. And I think on some units it's on the other side, but you get the idea. It's right there. It's fine. That is how it works. Let me show you something. This is the SSD out of the T430. Why is it not in the machine, you might ask? It's dead. I don't know what happened. I guess it's just finally had enough. It's only 5 years old, so it's not even that old. But I guess maybe this was just one of those duds or something. I noticed that I've been getting increasing numbers of driver failures, things that don't start, things that stop working. I'd have to reboot the machine to regain control of it. Windows was acting strange. So I'm guessing that it's just SSD corruption that, finally just caught up with it. So, that's that. I'm sure I'm going to have some dumbass come into my comment section, and yes, I really do mean it when I say dumbass. But the SSD drive doesn't mean the computer sucks. And okay, you've got a point. That doesn't mean anything about the machine. But I'm bringing it up because I want to point this out. So I grabbed another drive. I don't have any other SSDs, so I grabbed a regular hard drive. But in the process, I noticed something. Okay, we'll get that out of the way. This is one of the shock mounts off of the T430. And this is one of the shock mounts off of a T400. All previous generation ThinkPads use these. So let's see if we can spot all the obvious problems here. Well, number one, this is made out of rubber, which is a very good shock absorbent material. This is made out of plastic. Not so shock absorbing, now is it? For an SSD, this doesn't matter. For a regular hard drive, this is worthless. This will not do a damn thing. So there's design flaw number one. They really did not think that one through. Design flaw number two is as follows. Look at this. They're not even the same size. Now what does that mean? Let me show you what that means. This is what that means. This is a regular 2.5-inch laptop style hard drive. It doesn't fit. What a freaking design flaw. So what does that mean? Well, that means you can't put the average hard drive, or indeed pretty much every hard drive ever produced, with very few exceptions, into this machine, even if you wanted to. Now, I can see why you wouldn't want to do that. You'd obviously want to use an SSD to get the most performance. But come on. That drastically limits your upgrade options. If you want more storage, they're basically telling you, well, go screw the proverbial goose. That's all they're doing. Ridiculous. So what does that mean for you if you're in the same situation that I am and you need an interim solution? You're going to need to have the Ultra Bay adapter. You're going to need to put your boot drive in the Ultra Bay adapter, and consequently in the Ultra Bay. So what does that mean? Well, that means if you had a hard drive in there previously, like, say, this one, you'll have to boot that out and find another solution, probably by buying a USB enclosure. I already have this one lying around, so that's not really a big deal. But it does nerf your performance, unless you happen to have a USB 3.0 port open. I don't. But that's just with my configuration. However, the big negative, if you have an optical drive in here and you actually care about it, well, too bad, so sad, now you don't have your optical drive anymore. I guess they want you to buy a docking station in that case, because I think the docking station, at least the bigger one, does have another Ultra Bay on it, which would be a nice thing to have, but it would take up a lot more space, and those are not cheap anyways. So, really, they're giving you the proverbial goose anyways, no matter how you spin it. So, like I had mentioned previously, thin is only really good if it doesn't detract from the design. And I think that the thinning out of this, which is designed very similar to the R40 we just looked at, hard drive or SSD bay, such as the case may be, above ports, it's the same design, just slightly different, but it's too thin. This design here does not support that. It is a design flaw. It is a bug. They should have fixed it before this even went to market. Okay, so I think that is pretty much it for that. I have said all that I need to say. So what's the conclusion that we can draw here? Don't buy one of these. They are not worth your money, even used. If you're going to buy a ThinkPad, specifically a T-Series ThinkPad, the newest you will be able to go to get something that's actually worth buying is the T420 or the 520. The 430 and newer are worthless. The design makes too many compromises, the keyboard is junk, and even though, at least on the 430, I don't think you can do it on the 440, but you might be able to. I don't really have too much experience with those. You can put the new Record Start keyboard in this, but you need to have the keyboard, 1, you need to modify it, 2, and 3, like I said, that's a hack on top of a poorly designed solution. So you shouldn't even have to go there in the first place. If you gotta go there, why don't you just get a 420? I mean, it's a Sandy Bridge machine. But the Ivy Bridge, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't really offer too much over the Sandy Bridge that makes it so that you have to get an Ivy Bridge machine. There's no real reason for it. So, that's my opinion on that. So even though I'm able to fix the keyboard issue, even though I'm able to fix the trackpad issue, even though I can live with most of the other problems this has, the build quality leaves a lot to be desired. I mean, it's cheap plastic. Even the frame, which on previous ThinkPads was magnesium, it's plastic. And not even a very good plastic either. So, it's cheapened out. It's too cheap. It's not worth the money that it cost when it was new. It's not even worth spending money on now. They're not worth anything. If you really want a business laptop that's modern, go get yourself an HP EliteBook. You'll be much happier. So, anyway, I think that is pretty much all I need to say. Thank you for watching. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them down below. And this is CP666 signing off. Hope to see you next time. Till then, hopefully I didn't make any ThinkPad enthusiasts unhappy with this video, but frankly, I'm unhappy with this computer. It's just been getting progressively worse and worse. I mean, I guess it still works, so there's one thing, but yeah, it's on the replacement block, I'll just tell you that. When it will actually get replaced, I don't know, but there will certainly be a video from this channel when it does.